You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
We heard you. 9 years of Bring Back the Snack Wrap, and you've won. But maybe you should have asked for more. Say hello to the Hot Honey Snack Wrap. Now you've really won. Go to McDonald's and get it while you can.
All you need is a few minutes to start your day off with something historic when you listen to the This Day in History podcast. Every day there's a new episode for you to listen and learn about what happened that day way back when. So listen and subscribe to This Day in History wherever you get your podcasts. That's This Day in History wherever you get your podcasts.
He had the coldest look in his eyes that I had ever seen. I feel like I have to tell a story here. Unique to Bill Clinton, maybe. I'm researching this story, and there I am in the library in New Jersey, and I've got My Life open. My Life is Bill Clinton's autobiography. Somebody goes over to my desk in the library. They see his picture, and this man, maybe either late 50s or 60s, something like that, baseball cap, can't help but even in a library to just say, like, do you believe anything that guy says? I didn't quite know it. That is a first, and I've been to many libraries, but it shows the feelings that Clinton would bring out in some people. And I felt I had to include that little anecdote because it is something that he deals with. We can talk about all this abstract policy and everything, right? But the Washington Post ABC News poll in August of 1993 found that only 35% of Americans said they believed Clinton was honest and trustworthy. And to put that in perspective, that's lower, maybe at this point he's getting a 43% approval rating. So there's about 10% that approve of the job he's doing, but really wouldn't want to take his word for anything. This is an unresolved problem in 1993, and I think it's part of the legacy. I'm not saying this at all to knock Clinton. I'm observing a phenomenon that I observed. There are successes, to be sure, but many failures in 1993, especially failures of public relations and managing that Washington press just as the year was rounding out. President Clinton was meeting with UK Prime Minister John Major. A series in the Washington Post were calling for a further investigation of the Whitewater matter that had been brought up in the campaign. And the failure to turn over certain documents related to Whitewater stirs up further calls for investigations. The New York Times, who thought there was nothing to the investigation, still thought the administration was acting like there was and creating more mystery than there needed to be. He had the coldest look in his eyes that I had ever seen. One day in Paris, Bill Clinton would find himself face to face with Slobodan Milosevic, sitting across from him. He was intelligent, he was articulate, he was cordial. But Bill Clinton could read a person, and it came off as learned diplomacy, not something he was truly into. He was also paranoid, telling me he was sure that Rabin, Prime Minister of Israel, Rabin's assassination was the result of betrayal by someone in his security service. And then he turned and said, everyone knew that's what happened to President Kennedy too, but that you Americans have been successful in covering it up. I was no longer surprised by his support of the murderous outrages of Bosnia, and I had the feeling that I would be at odds with him before long. Indeed, Bill Clinton would correctly, by most historians' assessment, identify who was the true problem in the Yugoslav war that affected the world at the same time that he takes office. The trouble for Bill Clinton is this meeting that we described takes place 2 years later. In 1993, he's still a young new president. Foreign policy was always there, ever present in my daily routine and my concern. The general impression among Washington observers was that I wasn't too interested in foreign affairs. His national security advisor is Tony Lake, a college friend, and he had declared that success in foreign affairs is often defined by preventing or diffusing problems before they develop into headaches. If we do a really good job, no one will ever know it. On the morning of October 11th, 1993, the USS Harlan County approached the harbor of Port-au-Prince, Haiti, cutting through the calm Caribbean waters under the bright sun. On board were 200 U.S. and Canadian troops, along with military police and engineers, sent not for war, but mostly for peacekeeping. Their arrival was supposed to mark the first step in a carefully negotiated return to democracy on the island. Instead, they were met with chaos. On the docks waited a hostile, jeering mob, many of them armed, waving signs that read "Death to the Americans" and chanting threats against U.S. forces. They weren't just protesters. It was obvious that they were part of the paramilitary thugs loyal to the Haitian junta, the military regime that had overthrown the legitimately elected president, Jean-Baptiste Aristide, 2 years earlier. The Haitian police stood by and did nothing. The Harlan County isn't sure what quite to do. It doesn't seem like a good opportunity to land here. They weren't planned for a hostile engagement. Watching the scene unfold from Washington, the Clinton administration, already rattled from Black Hawk Down and the disaster in Somalia just a week earlier, made a fast, fateful call, and the Harlan County was turned around and it sailed away. Haiti's generals got the message. The United States wasn't ready to enforce its promises, and the mission collapsed before it began. But to understand how things unraveled that day, it began with a great promise on Governor's Island, New York. In July of 1993, President Bill Clinton faced mounting pressure to act on Haiti because the country had become a world humanitarian and political crisis. The democratically elected president, Aristide, had been ousted. The military regime ruled with brutal force. People were escaping in boats trying to get to Florida and other places. Repression deepened, and Haiti's economy crumbled. Wanting to avoid military intervention, the reaction was sanctions, but sanctions were hurting the people on the ground. So Clinton embraced the diplomatic path. That summer, the United Nations and the Organization of American States convened talks on Governor's Island in New York Harbor. The U.S. supported the effort, but stayed slightly in the background, letting the OAS and the UN handle the negotiations. The result was the Governor's Island Agreement. Signed on July 3, 1993, Aristide returns to power. The general of the junta, Raul Cedras, would step down. Haiti's armed forces would all receive amnesty for what they did. The U.S. and International Committee would lift sanctions, and Aristide would name a consensus prime minister, most likely a moderate businessman named Robert Mauval, to oversee the transition. On paper, it looked like a balanced compromise. But almost immediately, the junta began to stall, resist, and sabotage. Mauval does return to Haiti, but he finds himself powerless. The military refuses his orders. Human rights continue. And when the first peacekeepers arrived, as we said, they're turned away. Haiti would not be solved in the first year of Bill Clinton's presidency. In fact, a lot of problems would not be solved. Mauval ends up resigning in frustration. Aristide is still stranded in exile. It would take another year another round of diplomacy with some heavyweights like Colin Powell and Jimmy Carter, and the threat of 20,000 U.S. troops before Haiti's military finally yielded. But in 1993, the junta was still in place. There's many items in the news in 1993 as Bill Clinton is taking on the challenges of the country. The World Trade Center is bombed on February 26. A truck bomb detonates in a parking garage beneath the North Tower. It kills 6 people, and it injures over 1,000. The FBI quickly traces the attack to a group of Islamic extremists. It's the first major foreign terror attack on U.S. soil. It's a foreshadowing of what's to come. Indeed, they're still trying the perpetrators of this event when 9/11 happens. In the same year, 2 CIA employees are killed in a shocking attack outside CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Pablo Escobar, the drug dealer, is killed after years of evading justice. He was tracked down and shot by police on a Medellin rooftop. Czechoslovakia peacefully dissolves. The Velvet Divorce results in 2 independent states, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. The Mars Observer spacecraft, which is launched by NASA in 1992, was poised to be the first American mission to orbit Mars in 2 decades. But just 3 days before it reaches the area where it can start that orbit around the planet, there's no more contact. Despite repeated efforts, the spacecraft was never recovered. President Clinton made no major comment. Doom is released in 1993, a video game that, released by id Software as shareware on December 10th, it spreads across university networks and computer labs like wildfire. They don't really have the web yet in 93. It's kind of probably difficult to think about. There is an internet, but there's not a web. So that visual experience of surfing the web, going around to various websites, isn't really happening for most people who don't have advanced computer equipment in 1993. But there is an internet, and there is connected networks, and people are sharing software. Doom spreads that way. No one had really experienced this before, a fast, immersive, first-person shooter from the eyes of the shooting person. Now, it's set on Mars, in a military research base gone to hell. You are a nameless space marine, tasked with fighting off demons with whatever you have. Sometimes you'll see a fist. Sometimes there's a chainsaw or a shotgun. Doom was distributed to maybe 10 million users within months. It coined the term Doom clone for all of the types of games that would follow. Bill Clinton wasn't playing Doom, but he had been long known for his love of card games. None more so than Hearts, a game he played obsessively from his college years throughout his presidency. Friends and aides recall him breaking out a deck during long campaign flights, during downtime on the campaign trail, or even aboard Air Force One. He played with staffers, journalists, sometimes security personnel, turning each hand into a mix of strategy and social engagement. It didn't extend to his wife. By contrast, Hillary Clinton never shared that. She reportedly found the game tedious and declined to join, leaving Bill to enjoy it with others in his circle. There's a reason why a politician like Clinton might like Hearts. It's a classic 4-player game, built on a deceptively simple premise. There are certain cards that score points. Don't score points. Don't get those cards. Do everything you can to avoid getting those cards. Each heart taking in a trick counts against you. You don't want the cards with hearts. The Queen of Spades carries a steep penalty. The winner is the player who finishes it with the fewest points when someone sets the limit, usually 100. But within this simple structure lies a surprisingly complex psychological game. Players have to watch each other's move, infer what's being withheld, bait opponents into grabbing the wrong trick. There's also a daring exception. If you do so badly, if you manage to collect every penalty card in a single round, you shoot the moon, and you gain a dramatic advantage. And so it's a mix of calculation and risk. This likely brings Bill Clinton to it. It rewards the patient, the observant, those who can disguise their real intentions. You have to read the room. You have to remember what cards have been played. The game combines intellect and instinct. The game's requirement to avoid certain cards while managing one's hand. It mirrors the political necessity of navigating complex situations while minimizing risks. It could have applied to Clinton's first year in the White House. The mechanics of the game rewards players who know how to hold back, deflect danger, and time their moves carefully. But in politics, as in hearts, restraint can sometimes look like floundering.
But there are no easy lines here, militarily, diplomatically, culturally.
This is a war with enormous potential to spread to other countries and complicate the lives of the United States and the Western allies.
In 1993, the city of Sarajevo is trapped in a nightmare. For months, Serbian forces encircle the Bosnian capital, shells its apartment buildings, shells its marketplaces and hospitals. A beautiful city that people had known from the previous Olympics that had been there, caught in the crossfire. People are shot by snipers simply for crossing the street. And yet, the United States, under its new president, saw it as an expensive gamble to get involved. Yet Bill Clinton had criticized President George Bush, H.W. Bush, for standing by while ethnic cleansing spread throughout the Balkans. He said during this campaign, "We may be the only country that can stop the slaughter. And we should try." Clinton accused Bush of a do-nothing policy, pledged under his leadership they wouldn't turn their backs on victims of aggression. He even floated support for lifting the arms embargo against the Bosnian Muslims. See, in the fight that's going on, they are the group that isn't armed, and it didn't seem fair. But once in office, he inherited a Pentagon deeply wary of new entanglements. Allies in Europe had already deployed peacekeepers. They were reluctant to escalate anything. When his new national security team presented options, none seemed clean. You could lift the arms embargo and get more arms in so that the Bosnians could defend themselves. But then you'd just be escalating, right? You hear these debates today as I record this, in the Ukraine debate. You could bomb Serbian positions, which might endanger peacemakers. In some ways, the peacemakers that European countries had put in the ground now are limiting what the United States can do. So far from this just being this moment of indecision by this young, new president, there's a lot of complexity and no good answers.
As you know, the president said he's committed to further action to end the bloodshed, to stop the Bosnian Serb campaign of ethnic cleansing. He's still on that track.
So what follows is a year of half steps. Clinton approves humanitarian airlifts into Sarajevo, carefully calculated to avoid a direct confrontation. Okay, it's a positive step, but now you're getting the criticism, so you're just feeding the people that are still under shelling. It's good, but you're not helping them from the bigger problem. He floats the idea of lift and strike, lifting the arms embargo on the Bosnian Muslims and backing it with NATO air power. France and Britain strongly oppose it. He calls the violence unacceptable, Clinton does. He calls it a moral challenge to the international community. In private, he struggles with conflicting pressures.
This is a very busy day for you. And,
Thanks.
there are no rules for days like today.
No rules. How you doing?
Fine. How are you doing?
Good.
You found out about the Bosnian rejection last night before you went to bed?
Yeah, I stayed up until I found out.
The Pentagon is advising caution. Black Hawk Down, a disaster in Somalia, just shows what can happen if he sends troops and things go wrong. The UN had deployed peacekeepers, UNPROFOR, but gave them neither the mandate nor the firepower to stop the violence. Boutros Ghali publicly urged the U.S. to do more, while privately struggling to hold the Security Council together, because Russians were backing the Serbs in this encounter. Now, Clinton will get some criticism for this, from both Democrats and Republicans. Senator Bob Dole says the United States cannot be a superpower on the sidelines. What leadership are we offering the world? William Safire, the New York Times, calls Clinton tentative, reactive, poll-tested. Frank McCloskey, a Democrat who represents Indiana's 8th District, with no family or political connections in Bosnia, no constituency in his district. He continues to call on Clinton to do more. A Milosevic's Serbian victory, he says, will expose the end of America's military commitment to European peace and security. There will be no particular action that Clinton takes in 1993.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. Break through the busiest time of year with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. With real-time guidance and endless ways to move, you can personalize your workouts and train with confidence, helping you reach your goals in less time. Let yourself run, lift, sculpt, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Really the next year either, except the next year we'll see him unofficially through silencing diplomats for a bit, giving no instructions. He'll end up doing that, lifting that arms embargo, and that just gets Iran involved in the providing arms to the Bosnian Muslims, complicating the whole thing, maybe putting UN peacekeepers in trouble. There are other events occurring in 1993. The European single market opens. Nearly 300 million people can now move, work, and trade freely across borders. Rodney King's federal trial and conviction. 2 Los Angeles police officers were found guilty in federal court of violating his civil rights. The British Prime Minister and the Irish Taoiseach signed the Downing Street Declaration, a document that acknowledged the right of the people in Northern Ireland to decide their own future. Clinton closely monitors the situation, issues a statement calling for the declaration. Clinton is very involved and will be involved later in what'll lead up to the Good Friday Agreement. Jurassic Park is released, sets office records. The X-Files premieres, blending government paranoia with supernatural storytelling. Pope John Paul II issues the Veritatis Splendor. The encyclical reaffirms traditional Catholic doctrine and warns against moral relativism. Cliffhanger, Sylvester Stallone's movie, is released. It's a bit of a comeback for Stallone, who had some underperformers, like that arm wrestling movie. It's praised for its practical effects and for stunt work. There's no CGI back then, including one scene of Stallone dangling 4,000 feet above the ground. One stunt was so dangerous, it was entered into the Guinness Book of World Records for a single transfer between 2 planes at a high altitude. Critics gave it mixed to positive reviews. But who cares? Audiences loved it. Bill Clinton, now 8 months into his term, was about to address a joint session of Congress to overhaul the American healthcare system. There was millions of Americans, there still are, but there was an even greater percentage of Americans with no healthcare insurance, and thus many of them had no healthcare. Clinton steps up to the podium. The nation is watching. Lyndon Johnson had done the last audacious healthcare overhaul in American history. Jimmy Carter had tried. Now Clinton looks into the teleprompter and at the sea of faces, the elected representation of the United States of America. And when he looks into that teleprompter, he sees the screen is blank. The wrong speech. Vice President Al Gore's remarks had been loaded instead of Clinton's. For a flicker of a second, he freezes. But Bill Clinton, relying on memory and instinct, he launches to the opening of what would have been that speech on the teleprompter anyway. Improvises for the first few minutes. Behind the scenes, aides are scrambling to correct the glitch. On live television, Clinton, a former Rhodes Scholar with a memory built for moments like this, rolls forward. And then when the teleprompter caught up, he didn't miss a beat. This is a time of great change for our country. The old ways don't work. He lays out the case that America's healthcare system's broken, morally and economic. 40 million people uninsured, millions more underinsured, small businesses drowning in premiums. We're spending more, and we're getting less. He gestured to guests in the gallery. Clinton told the story of Rick and Judy Brown, an average American couple who had insurance, till their son was born with a serious illness, and their policy just simply dropped them. He called for universal coverage, an employer mandate, cost containment. Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa said, "This is the first time in my career I've seen a president speak to the real human toll of our healthcare mess." Republican Senator Phil Gramm of Texas saw it differently. What I heard tonight was a plan to create the most massive government bureaucracy since the New Deal. There will be higher taxes, employer burdens, and rationed care. Around the same time, Hillary Clinton appears before Congress in 1993 in a historic moment. She walks into a packed hearing room on Capitol Hill, not as First Lady alone, but as the architect of the most ambitious healthcare overhaul in American history. Dressed in a royal blue suit and seated behind a nameplate that read, Mrs. Hillary Rodham Clinton, she was introduced as the head of the President's Task Force on National Healthcare Reform. This was unprecedented. No First Lady had ever testified before Congress on legislation in which she had taken such a role. She was greeted with television cameras, sharpened pencils, and skepticism. Hillary began. Millions of Americans, she said, are just one illness away from financial devastation. And her performance was long, over 5 hours of testimony. She displays a command of the material that impressed even some of her critics. But her confidence was what made some lawmakers bristle. Senator Bob Paquin of Oregon leaned in and says, Ms. Clinton, you have an incredible command of the facts. But you're asking us to pass a bill that will affect every American family, and you've left almost no flexibility. Behind closed doors, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, chair of the committee, would say he had misgivings. Others, including the conservative radio show host Rush Limbaugh, who raises his profile in a much larger way in the early days of the Clinton administration, even has a very brief TV show, which was not common for talk show radio hosts at that time, mocks her endlessly. Cartoons depict her in lab coats, leading the country from behind the scenes, the idea of a first lady chairing a policy task force and confronting senators on C-SPAN make many in Washington look at. On October 27th, shortly after formally submitting the Health Security Act to Congress, President Bill Clinton gives a televised speech, explains the plan to the American public, and in one moment he holds up a white plastic card and said, "This card will give you health security."
This is confidential.
But this was covered under our old plan.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one, wasn't it?
That fall, Congress was fully engaged on health care, if they weren't convinced. Hearings were held in both chambers, Senate Finance Committee, House Energy Commerce Committee, to vet the administration's proposed act.
Things are changing, and not all for the better. The government may force us to pick from a few healthcare plans designed by government bureaucrats.
Having choices we don't like is no choice at all.
Yeah, they choose.
We lose.
There are TV ads, including a famous ad about a couple that found this plan confusing and that would raise their costs, of course funded by pharmaceutical and insurance companies.
For reforms that protect what we have, call toll-free. Know the facts. If we let the government choose, we lose. Call today.
Republicans called the plan socialized medicine.
You've probably seen a yuppie couple named Harry and Louise on TV recently questioning the president's health care plan. Well, I thought I'd bring you up to date. Harry lost his job and also his insurance. Louise owned a small, struggling company that couldn't afford group insurance, so she'd always depended on Harry's policy. Unfortunately, she had a pre-existing condition that prevented her from obtaining new coverage. Now, it's true, Louise should have gone into the hospital earlier, but she didn't want to eat into their savings.
Throughout 1993, nothing passes. And part of the reason is Senator Robert Byrd. Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia was the senator pro temp of the House and constitutional traditionalist, the oracle of Senate procedure. Over the summer and into August and September 1993, some White House aides floated the idea of using budget reconciliation. Okay, the idea behind budget reconciliation is that we can't have people holding up the budget of the United States for every little issue that a senator must have. So there's a reconciliation procedure, a rule in a sense, that has long been established in the Senate that you can't filibuster a budget, essentially. So the actual budget of the United States, the kind of day-to-day working budget, cannot be filibustered, which is great if you want to pass something because you only have to pass the budget by 51 votes then. No one can hold it up. The trouble is when people come up with new procedures, because every year that there's a new budget, there's going to be new things funded, right? So a determination has to be made, used by the Senate parliamentarian, but of course enforced and influenced by some leading figures. And at this time, Robert Byrd is definitely it. Going to be only a few senators that would be willing to cross him on knowledge of procedure. And as he starts hearing that the White House wants to use budget reconciliation for the Clinton Healthcare Security Act, he reacts and says it's too far broad. It doesn't just touch the budget. It's reshaping commerce, affecting the insurance market. It's going to create regulatory structures. So you're not just spending money. You're going to create new government entities. And by what was called the Byrd Rule, a Senate rule he authored in 1985, there could be no extraneous policy items in reconciliation bills. So by the time the Clinton plan was formally introduced in October 1993, they don't have this option. That means 60 votes in the Senate are needed. Every wavering Democrat would now have a veto, and they'd have to pick up a few Republicans. Byrd didn't oppose health reform in principle, but he said, if we sacrifice our process for speed, we lose the integrity of this institution. Tom Daschle, a rising leader from South Dakota, chair of the Democratic Policy Committee, supported Clinton's reform, but he starts trying to tell people behind the scenes, you're overreaching here. Please simplify this plan. Get rid of this technocratic language and bring Congress into the fold earlier. The plan's complexity and size would make it very difficult to defend. So in 93, Congress does hear hearings, drafts its own versions of the plan, listens to Hillary Clinton, but it passes nothing. No committee vote, not a floor vote, no legislation. The White House had used the entire bully pulpit of the presidency, opened the year with momentum, held the national stage, and delivered a clear moral message. But it ended at Congress's door. Years later, reflecting on the experience, even Hillary Clinton in Living History said, we had the right goals, but we made mistakes, how we presented the plan and how we worked with Congress. If Clinton's plan would have passed, what you would have seen is a bold, some might say scary, it depends on your perspective, but a very centralized healthcare program. Everyone gets a card. Then they're enrolled in a standard benefits plan. Insurers are required to provide insurance, an employer mandate. For small businesses, they can get subsidy. Americans would choose among private insurance companies, but only within regional alliances, large public purchasing pools that would set rules, pool risk, and negotiate premiums. These are the regulatory structures that Congress starts to get scared of. The plan aimed to reduce costs by streamlining administration, setting global budgets, and cutting waste, particularly in billing and bureaucracy. A national health board would define benefits and oversee the system. This part became real scary for a lot of folks. It was top-down overhaul. It was easy to call it big government healthcare, and it failed. By 1994, it's just dead when the midterms go against Democrats. But perhaps a state senator in Illinois was watching this. Indeed, as president, he would watch it real close of what happened. And he decided instead of providing a national card or a new agency, just keep the existing infrastructure, Medicaid, employer-based coverage, private insurers, create state-based insurance marketplaces. And if the state doesn't want to do it, institute a federal one where uninsured people can shop for plans. But keep insurance companies intact. Require insurers to accept everyone, regardless of their pre-existing conditions. But have subsidies tied to income so that people can pay for it. Have an individual mandate. Healthy people will be entering this insurance pool to make it work so that insurance companies will be able to make money off it. It was modular, pragmatic. When you look at the ACA in comparison to Clinton's healthcare program, President Obama does everything right. He does everything the right way. Congress is involved super early. And one of the people that would end up being a critic during the Clinton plan, Max Baucus, a moderate to conservative senator, Democrat from Montana, would end up largely writing the ACA. It's far from perfect. The individual mandate's gone. It's been under attack at different times. People say it's not enough. There's people who wanted a public options. Passes by the narrowest of margins, even with all these steps that Obama's taking to not repeat the mistakes of Clinton. Another thing he does, he gets the pharmaceutical companies on board, so they won't oppose it. And the way he does it, there's a former Congressman, Billy Tauzin, used to be a Democrat, then a Republican, then a lobbyist, who signs a deal where it's like, they're going to get benefits. The pharmaceutical industry will get benefits from this program. And the federal government agrees not to use its bulk purchasing power to drive down the cost of drugs. It survived over a decade, a lot of legal challenges, goes to the Supreme Court. It takes a while to get the website up, and the website initially there's problems over it. Then the court challenge, but it covers over 20 million people in the end. And so you could say that there was something to what Clinton did in 1993 in driving the idea to the a national presidential level focus. You see, when Lyndon Johnson does it, it's really about protecting older people. It's part of a pension program, Medicare. And that's really where the emphasis comes from, protecting seniors. When Carter does it, it's one of 111 different programs. It's not really focused on it, it's dropped. Clinton puts it in the forefront at least. And although it failed, 17 years later, at least a healthcare program gets passed. And it still remains an issue today. I'm not here to write Clinton's, biography or anything, but I think he can rightly take small claim for not having passed the legislation, but we talked about that moral command, that elevating healthcare to a moral issue, that having underinsured or uninsured Americans is not simply oh, well, that's the marketplace, but that there's actually something that we need to do about it. Bill Clinton's approval at the end of 1993 was just a little over 50%. He would later say, my staff was too inexperienced, had too few connections in Washington. Clinton had not put forth 100 proposals like Carter did, but the few he did put forth were big programs. The economy, healthcare, NAFTA, government reorganization were enough to occupy a whole presidency. The president does pass the North American Free Trade Agreement, so NAFTA becomes his, in addition to probably Family Medical Leave, becomes the most notable thing accomplished in the first year. And he has almost universal support here, almost. Newt Gingrich, who is going to be his bitter opponent in the midterms the next year, supports this. So does Republicans in Congress. Every living president, Carter, Reagan, Nixon, Bush, and Ford. Carter, Bush, and Ford are actually at the White House helping. Passing the North American Free Trade Agreement was helpful for Clinton's image as a kind of new Democrat and a supporter of free trade. Remember when that consensus existed? And having any legislative success is helpful to a president. But it would also hurt him a bit. We see the criticism of NAFTA today, and his allies in the labor movement and a group of Democrats like David Bonnier in Michigan, Richard Gephardt, not so thrilled with this kind of free trade. Ross Perot debates Al Gore on television over the NAFTA program. And he starts talking about the great sucking of jobs away from America coming from NAFTA. So that's a signal that him and his 19% group are saying you're doing something bad here, Mr. Clinton. But there's something else I want to say about 1993. He had been down in the polls so low, there was nowhere to go but up. Bill Clinton had a kind of reverse honeymoon. He had a very bad first year and a couple of years, and then admiration, respect, and support for the rest of the years, particularly the second term of his presidency. Well, there was always a lot of controversy, resistance from partisans, and the investigations never stopped. He was always answering for something, some of which he caused by his own actions and answers. On December 18th, in the American Spectator, a story by David Brock will quote 4 state troopers saying that they procured women for then-Governor Bill Clinton. Brock would admit that he had been funded by right-wing groups to create stories about the Clintons. '93 was not, by any measure, the best year of the Clinton presidency. There were a couple of achievements that he could check a box on, but overall, opinion wasn't strong. The successful signing of NAFTA at least made him look like there was some leadership, and from a low of 37% approval in June, Bill Clinton gets his numbers to 54% by the end of December. Clinton goes to see a performance of Handel's Messiah. The crowd salutes him. I didn't realize how upset I had been this year until I felt tears of gratitude. I want to thank you for listening. The website's www.myhistorycanbeatupyourpolitics.com. Remember our Patreon.